Viva Cristo Rey. Happy feast day of Christ the King. I'm Gene Zanetti, your coast-to-coast spiritual coach from Spiritual Strength. Remember, we're building athletes for Christ, and an athlete for Christ needs to know the way, show the way, and go the way. Today's the feast of Christ the King. So what do we know about that? Now, it's pretty obvious that Christ is the King of the universe, right? He's God. All authority on heaven and earth comes from him. So we know he's the King of the universe. But the reason why this feast was established by Pope Pius XII, I have this little booklet with me, tan booklet, great to get. So the company tan, of course, it's not tan itself, but the reign of Christ the King. This is an excellent little booklet that tan put out. Very simple to read. You can knock this out in probably a half hour. But it talks about the history of Christ the King. I'd like to pull this up on the feast day. Pope Pius XI said, I'm reading here, instituted the feast of the kingship of Christ. Okay, the Pope explained that the annual celebration of the feast would remind nations that not only private individuals, but also rulers and princes are bound to give public honor and obedience to Christ. Okay, so the doctrine is the social reign of Christ the King. So Christ is the King of everything. Not only our personal heart, but also non-believers, also the government, also the local shop down the street, also the store, every place. Christ is the King of everything because he is the only one with unconditional authority. Okay, Christ came and established an authority structure on earth, and he says, we hear in St. Paul that we're supposed to be obedient to the government and things like that, but governments only have conditional authority. A husband who has conditional authority over his wife and children, the wife who has conditional authority over her children, okay? The Pope who has conditional authority over the church, the bishops who have conditional authority over the diocese, all are subject to Christ the King. That's what that means. So we have to think about obedience. As Catholics, it's all about authority. Christ came and established an authority structure, albeit a conditional authority structure until he comes again, but it's there for us. Authority is all about protection, and we need to be obedient to authority. So that means we are supposed to follow government rules. If we work for someone, we have a boss, we're obedient to our boss. We're obedient to our parents. We're obedient to the laws of the government, even if we disagree with them. Now, of course, the key point here is everything is subject to God. So when it comes to matters in faith and morals, the government doesn't have any say in the matter. Okay, properly speaking, the government has no say in that matter. We don't. Neither do policemen. Neither do firefighters. Everyone. Okay, everyone has to follow the faith and morals that are laid out by the church. Okay, so this has been a constant teaching of the church that Christ is the King of the universe, of every aspect of the universe. A lot of times I know I heard growing up, we have to separate church and state, right? Separating church and state. That's impossible because Christ is not only the King of the church, he's also the King of the state. Okay, so yes, we be obedient to the state, but the state has to be obedient to Christ. Okay, the child has to be obedient to their parents. Okay, the employee has to be obedient to the employer. The student has to be obedient to the teacher. The athlete has to be obedient to the coach, as long as the authority is in line with the teachings of the church. Very important to remember, okay? So when there seems to be a contradiction between authority and the teachings of the church on matters of faith and morals, you have an obligation, not only a right, you have an obligation to follow the teachings of the church. You have to. That's our obligation. Okay, so when you think of things, when I looked up liberalism and what's that all about, at the core of being a liberal comes the assumption that we rarely think about the assumptions that underline a lot of these philosophies. Okay, and I was a liberal for a while. Okay, so and I didn't really understand what was going on there. So the fundamental assumption there is that man determines right or wrong. In other words, individual people determine how they should live their life, what religion they should be. And yes, I agree, we're all psychologically capable of choosing things on our own. But we have to understand that we are morally bound. If we believe that Jesus Christ came to earth and left us a church, created a church in the apostles, that he said the gates of hell wouldn't prevail against. They have the power to bind and loose. Whoever hears you hears me. Whoever rejects you rejects me. And to Peter, tend my sheep, feed my sheep, tend my lambs, right? We know that from there, we have to be obedient to the teachings of the church. We cannot deny that. So the other side of liberalism, the opposite would be, because I'm not trying to set up the dichotomy between liberal and conservative. The opposite side of the liberal end would be, God gave us rules and teachings through the church, right? And there's also the natural law, and we have to conform to those teachings. We don't get to choose religion. We don't get to choose faith and morals, because God established what we're supposed to believe and what morals are. What's the code we're supposed to follow? The creed, the cult, and the conduct are all predetermined by God, and it's our job as humans to conform to that, to the truth. Okay? A liberal would believe that each individual person is free and not bound to conform to the truth. In other words, they could determine for themselves whatever they want. Okay, the other side is more along the lines of, we know the laws of mathematics, everyone has to conform to them. We know the laws of physics, now we have to conform to the laws of physics. We know the laws of the English language, now we conform to the English language. But when it comes to faith and morals, a liberal would say, we're free to choose that. Whereas someone who is not a liberal, again, I'm not trying to set up I'm not trying to set up a dichotomy of liberals versus conservatives. The person on the opposite end of the liberals, who's not, would say that no, we don't get to make up the laws of faith and morals because they were already outlined for us by God. Therefore, it's our job, just like mathematics, just like physics, just like the laws of the English language, just like even the fundamentals of sports, whether it be a golf swing, whether it be how you serve in tennis, we have to conform to those principles. We don't get to choose what the principles are for golf or for physics or for math any more than we get to choose the moral law, faith and morals. Okay, so just wanted to break that down. It's real important. It's something I had to wrestle with a lot. I didn't quite understand it because in my years, thinking back in school and growing up and different things I've heard from friends, we'd say, oh yeah, freedom of religion. Sounds great, right? Freedom of, everyone's free to determine how they live their life. It sounds great and empowering and everything, but that's not our understanding as Christians. As Christians, we believe that God came to earth and God told us how to live. And it's our job, we have to conform to what God wants. So Pope Leo XIII said God has the right to be worshipped on his terms, not on our terms. So we seek the truth, but then once we find the truth there, we're supposed to settle there. We're supposed to stay in those faith and morals under the protection of the authority structure of the church. So anyone who is an authority in any way, whether it be a parent, whether it be an employer, whether it be a government official, everyone has to be subject to Christ the King. That's what this feast is all about. It's not just the fact that Jesus is the king of the universe. He's the king of your life, he's the king of the government, and he's the king of every aspect of the world. You can't separate your faith from government. You can't separate religion and state. There's no such thing as separation of church and state because Christ is the king of everything. Think about it. Pray about it. I'd love to hear your feedback. As we say with everything, you could be rich. You could be in great shape. You could have all this money, all these friends. You could be strong in all areas of your life. But if you don't have spiritual strength, you're weak. God bless you. God bless your families. And Viva Cristo Rey.